Greetings and welcome to Bring It On. My name's Bob Hayes and I'm going to be your show host for this week's show. This week's show is going to give you some information on the town property that the town is attempting to acquire for the Department of Public Works building, or Hanson Town DPW, or whatever we happen to call them. I have two gentlemen here that are going to be answering all the questions that we can talk about today, and we hope that it's pretty informative for you. I have Selectman Mitchell with me, Kenny Mitchell. Kenny.
Hey, Bob.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And I have Dan Tenney from the architectural firm of Weston and Sampson, who was hired by the town to do all the necessary things that the people want to hear about and see so it can be brought to you at town meeting. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming.
No problem.
It's interesting. We have a lot of inquiries about what's going on, and it's not the DPW, Kenny. It's called the Highway Department.
Right,
same
Highway
thing.
Department.
Some people do get confused, though. I mean, I've been on the spot before and gotten confused myself.
A lot of people call it the highway bond, too.
Yeah, the highway bond. But the long and the short of it is, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking today about the highway bond, maybe the replacement of the current highway bond down at the old light control property. And we have these gentlemen here to answer some questions and hopefully, as I try to do with every show, give you some information so you'll have a better idea of how to vote when it comes to town meeting, because it's an expensive proposition and we want everybody well informed. So, gentlemen, I know that just briefly and quickly, Kenny, you kind of took over chairing the committee.
Yes, that's correct.
After the last election, so
Yeah,
you're chairing the
in May.
committee now in May. So anyone that's viewing or would like to speak to you, to ask you some questions, they can, correctly?
Absolutely.
How would they get a hold of you?
They can call me by phone or they can email me.
Okay, what's your email address?
My email is footballgrass@gmail.com.
Footballgrass.
Grass, @gmail.com.
Okay, great. Because a lot of people do have questions and they don't know who to go to, and you know, we're trying to get the best idea out there for all the people of Hanson.
Right.
So, give us a brief description of what's going on, where we are right now with this project.
All right, so right now, Hawks Ave, as you know, light control, well, it's Hubble. Hubble wants to give the town 7 acres. Okay, along with the 7 acres is 2 buildings of about 22,000 square feet with both of the buildings. So we have to, the reason why we hired Dan's company is we have to now take these metal buildings and find out what it's going to cost to convert that into a new highway department, meaning offices and lifts, you know, mechanic bays and a place where residents can come in. And so that's where Dan comes in. So right now the committee is just going over what we're going to need in that new building and stuff like that.
So Dan's charge is to come up with a price, so to speak, of what this conversion is going to be. Is that what you're telling me,
Yes.
so to speak?
Yes.
Now, just in layman's terms, it's pretty easy to say 22,000 square feet. Approximate size of the buildings, like 400 by 300, or what's
Dan
the
might
size?
be a little better
I think
than that.
I think there are 2 buildings, and we're really concentrating on one of them, which is about big enough to house the requirements of the highway department. And I think it's about 12,000 square feet, something like that in that first building. That translates to a building about 100 feet by 120 feet, roughly. I think it's actually a little narrower and a little bit longer. But by comparison, if you're familiar with the existing highway garage, the first building as you come down the hill at
The green building where the offices are.
Right, the green building, that's about 6,000 square feet. So we're talking total about twice that size.
Okay. And this would be to house all the men,
Yep.
the headquarters, like the offices. I know that there's a
Sure.
secretary,
Yep.
and I know that Bob Brown needs an office, and I'm assuming there must be a lunchroom,
Yep.
some sort of showers or bathrooms.
Sure.
And then equipment storage.
Yes, there's a little bit of each in this building, and it's just about the right size for the requirements of the department. So what we did before we even looked at the building too closely was to analyze how the department was structured, how many people there were, how many vehicles there were, what kind of maintenance was done, on premises, how much storage was needed, how much small equipment space was needed, and really what would it take to build a state-of-the-art facility, the right size for this department. And once we'd done that, then we tested our programming with all the rooms that you mentioned, pretty much those, to see if they would fit in that building. And it turns out they fit very nicely into the first building at Hawks Avenue.
What would we do with the second building?
The second building, at this point, we're looking at it as an additional storage building because, as everyone knows, there is no such thing as enough storage, whether that's for in your house or for equipment in a public works yard. So that's going to be minimally renovated and just adapted to use as essentially a cold storage, unheated storage building.
That wouldn't be, I know we talk about, and again, I'm a little vague because I'm not in the highway department business, but I know that they need sand and salt under cover.
Right.
It needs to stay
So
dry.
there'll be a salt shed that will be on the side of the property. It won't be in either one of these buildings.
Now, the salt shed, is this something that we would need to build?
Yes.
Or is there a building on premises?
No, it's something we'll need to build.
So just so and again, I'm trying to do this as an informational type thing. We wouldn't be moving the salt shed from the current location to that location.
No, we wouldn't.
Because some of these questions have been asked. You know, it hasn't, the
only
people have
thing-
questions because it's difficult. They don't know. It's kind of like I was using highway department, DPW. You know, each
The only thing
town's
that we
different.
possibly may move is the fuel that's at the current building, and even that's in discussion, but they have gas and diesel for all the Hanson vehicles,
Sure.
and that possibly may get moved to the new facility.
Now, currently, that fuel thing, the fuel tank is above ground.
Right.
That's correct.
So there's nothing to remove from the old facility. As far as there's no tank in the ground because
No.
I'm trying, again, I'm asking these questions because people have said, well, there's tanks in the ground. We're
Yeah,
going to
no,
have
there's no-
remediation
Right.
and all of the above. And I said, I believe the fuel tank that's behind the green building is an above ground tank.
Yes, that's correct.
And it holds 10,000 gallons or something of
Right.
diesel
Yeah.
and gasoline.
Five and
and
five.
that's movable. Okay.
Right.
All right. So when we talk about cost to the town, I mean, Dan, I'm not. Again, I'm asking these questions. People are scared about two different things, and I'm not sure if this question is the right question to ask you. A lot of people are nervous that the current site is contaminated and we're going to have big remediation.
Right.
And the site we're moving to had a tremendous amount of remediation of contaminants. When we get this site from Hubble, that they're going to deed over to the town, is it going to have a 100% clean bill of health?
Yes, they will.
So by a clean bill of health, I guess I'm going to spell it out a little bit further. 21E type testing, they drill into the ground and do coring samples of the dirt. You know, they drill in, say, 30 feet, and they put in, whenever they hit water, they put in monitoring wells that they can pull out and test the water.
Which are currently in now, they're almost a year old, the
Okay,
monitoring wells.
Dan,
Right.
can you go into that just a
Sure,
little bit? Because
sure.
people are scared to death of this contamination factor. They're very worried that we're going to be receiving this ugly piece of property that's going to be a blight on the town as far as the contaminants. And I know a little bit about it because I've dealt with some of the stuff about core drilling
Sure.
and monitoring of wells. Can you explain how they monitor the wells? And
Sure.
I didn't know they've already been in for a year, Kenny.
Yeah, well, that's a real advantage. As Kenny mentioned, you know, often these go in pretty soon ahead of construction. Now, you know, in this case, we're going to have a year's worth of data. So if there's any indication of residual contamination, we'll know about it, which is not usually the case. So this site has been cleaned up under Mass EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers oversight. They've been very, very careful with it. And I think it's probably one of the safer sites that we've seen because of that. So,
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second, Dan? Because you bring
Sure.
up a fabulous point, and I don't want to go by it and forget.
okay.
The Army Corps of Engineers, it's not like Hubble hired an independent contamination firm to clean this up and they were paying. The Army Corps of Engineers came in and did this along with the EPA. Am
Right.
I correct?
Right. I think they're both involved. I don't know who actually executed the work, but this is very, very, you know, heavily monitored. very
Governmental
carefully.
agency.
Governmental agency, and there's been, you know, the Army Corps permit, for instance, is one thing that's been taking some significant time to close out because they have to check off every single box, every condition that was set when the site was assessed. Everything's got to be done and signed off before they can transfer the property. So it's a pretty careful process. And just in my experience, it's probably one of the most carefully monitored sites that I've seen, and that's a nice thing. The other advantage is that because we have existing buildings, we're not going to be doing a lot of excavation on the site, which means that if there's anything, unlikely to be anything significant still in the ground, we're not digging up for new foundations. So it's going to be a fairly light touch as far as developing the site is concerned.
And the only thing I'll add as far as the contamination on the property is not on the 7 acres that we're getting. The contamination is on the other side of the property. So when they cut off the portion that they're going to convey over to the town, there was no contaminants found on that. But there was contaminant, because right now it's one big pie. So there is contaminants, but once they cut it off, there's none on our side.
So I guess my question would be, because I'm sure the side that was contaminated, or the cutting off, as you so to speak, what's going on with that? Who's going to be dealing with that? Has that been cleaned up already also?
Yes, yes, that's been
So
cleaned
basically that's been removed. They've
Yes.
been monitoring the groundwater and
That's
the
correct.
soil samples.
up. And they continue to do that now today.
They have some sort of chart
Oh yeah,
to make sure that it doesn't change. I mean, again, I don't know the terms. I'm just trying to
sure.
give some of the people that might be watching this show some sort of an idea
The
about
state's
what's
going to take that, what is it, the wildlife, what is it called?
I think the DCR, I think, is taking it over. Am I
Taking
right?
over
Yeah.
that other
Yeah.
portion to go along with the barrage and all that's behind that property.
So there's a fairly good chance that if the state's getting all that property, they're not taking it if it's not clean. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct.
Right.
Because the cleanliness is a big factor to this whole thing. I know at town meeting, when we talk about this in October, that's why part of it I'm doing the show. I don't want to be there for 2 nights talking about this.
right.
I'd like to get it all out
Yeah,
on
Hubble
the
spent
table.
almost $4 million over there, cleaning up that. And this has been going on for almost 3 years now. In fact, they're about a year behind from conveying that property over to us. And right now, they're just waiting for plantings in the wetland areas. There's plantings of like grass that they have to do in the wetland area. Well, the Army Corps of Engineer won't, as Dan said, won't close out the permit on that until those plantings. So that's how fussy they are. They're worried about a little bit of grass, and it's not done, and they're not closing that permit until it's done.
Okay. So as not to keep beating that same old horse about this contamination problem, it appears to me, from what both of you are telling me, this property is clean.
Yes,
And the town of Hanson would get a clean bill of health.
yes.
So the remediation or the cleanup, as we put it, has been completed. Okay, I guess we couldn't be any more clear with that. We'll go to the other site in a few minutes after we talk about that. Go back to the buildings. The buildings that are there are basically existing steel buildings that are shell-type buildings that are between 7 and 10 years old.
Something like that. I think one's older than the other, but they're not too old and they're in fairly good condition.
Okay, and your job, as you said when we started out, this is to figure out what's the footprint is going to be,
Right.
will it work, how do we get in there,
Yep.
and how much the costs are going to be.
Right.
Is this going to be something, Kenny, that's going to be presented at town meeting, or can you tell me about it now and
As
give me a
far
little
as
preview?
the-
Maybe a touch on a little bit of the cost of what it's.
Well, right now, we still don't have a final cost, Bob. We're thinking it's going to come in between 4 and 5 million. It would be, but we don't have the exact
definite
final
cost.
cost.
Right, no, I
But one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to do a final design and engineering cost, which that's going to do is we'll be able to, if it passes on at town meeting on October 2nd, then we can we'll go on and do an RFP to actually go out and put out and Dan can even tell you a little bit about that.
Sure.
To find out what the cost is going to be. So put it out there and get an actual company to tell us what it's going to cost. So then next May town meeting, we'll be able to go to the taxpayers and say, listen, this building's going to be X. And everyone will know at that point when they make their decision.
So what's the vote you're looking for in October?
The vote I'm looking for October is for the engineering and final design to go out to an RFP.
And an RFP, ladies and gentlemen, means request for proposal. And what that means is They're going to have the final design. Now they've got to send it out to companies because it's a bidding thing in the state. It's a law because it's public funding. And they're going to ask companies to come in and say, this is the final design. How much is it going to cost to build, and how much are you going to try to charge us? Companies are at will to come in and submit proposals for the cost of exactly what the specifications are.
Right.
The engineering has to come first, then the RFP, the request for proposal, has to come after that.
Right.
But you've done quite a few of these
Oh, yes.
type jobs, so that's where you're coming up with the 4 to 5 million, because people have started out with saying, this project was $1 million, this project was $1.5 million. You've heard it, Kenny, all over town. This project was $2 million.
When I can tell you that when we started a year and a half ago, it was $7 million.
Yeah.
And the committee has done a great job,
Yeah.
downsizing it, and just putting in, the wants. And we took out any needs that were possibly there. And we've got that down a lot. We did a lot of work.
Now, impact to the neighborhoods. That is some issues. Some people are worried that Pleasant Street, South Street, Reed Street, because those are going to be the 3 streets that you really accessed. Whether you come straight down Pleasant, you come in from South,
It's
or you come
a
down
great question.
Reed.
We look at it as light control is there, Bob. They had 200 and something employees. Okay, the highway department has probably 8 employees full-time, and then during snow, they have about 24 subs. So now you're talking 30 people with vehicles coming in and out versus 200. And also they'll be the first ones to get their streets plowed too, obviously.
So there's a good side.
It's
There's
a
a
good
good
side.
side to
It's a
that.
good
Not
side.
always negative.
Sure.
Yeah, if you're living down there, wow, we'll be able to get out the quickest. I didn't look at it like
right,
that,
right.
but that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Any issues because the railroad tracks are right there? Does it add any? There's no real town safety issue because of the railroad track?
No, there's none to my knowledge.
It's not like a police vehicle is going to be stuck in there, a fire vehicle. It's town vehicles. Train, the gates go up, the gates go down.
Right.
Right.
And these are the vehicles that are keeping the roads clear, as you pointed out. What we've usually found with these types of facilities is that the traffic impact really happens before the rush hour in the morning and before the rush hour in the afternoon for your normal operations. And then they're in and out during the day, but it's not significant in most cases.
Okay, so the impact, it looks like, to the neighborhoods might be a lot more minimum than the people are thinking.
Right.
People envision highway department type vehicles as heavy duty trucks with loads of sand and loads of all of that stuff. So that impact you think will be minimal. Okay. All right, so that kind of stretches out that site. Is there anything you'd like to add that I haven't kind of touched on? I tried to hit all the numbers I could in my head, but sometimes it's more difficult. You guys are dealing with it. I know as a committee, Kenny, how many members do you have?
There's 7 of us.
7 people. And so there's been quite a bit of thought put into how it's going to go, and I know it's been
Different
kicked around.
opinions, and
Well,
thoughts.
and that's what I'm hoping that this show does, give some people, settle some questions
Right.
in their mind of where it's going to go, because it's a big dollar item for the town.
Right.
It's going to have a tax impact, and it's a long-term investment.
Right.
We're
And one of the things the committee wanted to make sure that we were 100% transparent, by doing this show. Dan was kind enough to give up part of his day to come on. We had an open house at the highway department on Saturday. Tracy's doing a great job getting as much information in the paper. We want to be 100% transparent, where if anybody has any questions at all, we want to be there to make sure and answer it for them.
One more question. Not being as central of a location as the current highway department, does that propose any issues that I'm not thinking of? Or that?
I think if it was a fire or a police department, then it may. But I think being a highway department, I don't think that poses any issues.
Okay. All right, so we've pretty much covered that. Let's jump over to the current site. If this proposal goes through, because a lot of people are saying, well, it's $4 to $5 million to do this proposed thing, and you even kind of confirmed it's going to be somewhere in that vicinity. What's the impact at the old location? What's the cleanup? What's the problem? What happens? What do we do? I'm sure you've taken
that's
some.
That's a great question. We also have an article that's going to be presented at town meeting, so we can find out those answers, and we can hire somebody to go in there and go through that property and tell us what it potentially might need.
Would it be the same type of testing? In other words, groundwater testing, drilling, coring samples to see if somehow over the years the town may have contaminated that type of site?
Sure.
Tear down of the buildings, or maybe reuse of like that big block, the green building, the green machine, the green monster, as we might call it.
Right.
The reuse of that building where they're reusing the old police station. I know some of the outbuildings are pretty much in really, really bad shape because myself, I've taken the tour. You know, I've gone and looked at the
I
buildings.
think those two buildings need to be torn down. You know, the garage.
Behind the green building?
Yeah, the garage, right. Leave the old police station there, but the office and the garage need to be torn down. And I'd like to see that go on to Parks and Fields somehow. And that discussion hasn't been, we're not even there yet, but me personally, be nice whether you do parking, or I don't know if there's enough room for another field, or, you know, a swing set, and, you know, because McQuon School, we're gonna be losing that out back over there. So something, you know, for the kids over there for that spot. That's what I'd like to see in the future.
Okay. Jumping back to town meeting, you talked about the proposals that you have on the table for October are to be voted to move forward for the engineering studies. When this comes forward in May, hopefully,
Yes.
you know, if everything's done for the request for proposal, the RFP, so to speak, will it all be bundled with the cleanup? Because a lot of people are concerned that, okay, we take the Hawks Ave property, we put $4 or $5 million in it, we get left another Plymouth County Hospital site type property that needs a remediation and
So
cleanup.
you're talking about the cleanup of the existing building?
Yeah, in other words, is this going to
It
come
can't-
as
it
one
can't
big
be-
project?
It can't be tied in, because when you're demoing a building, you can't, when you do a debt exclusion, you
Yep.
can't finance for more than 5 years on something that you're demoing.
Mm-hmm.
We could do 20-year debt exclusion on the new building, on the one we're doing, but you can't tie in the old building because you're limited to how long you can.
Okay, I'll restructure the question. It's not, let's make a deal.
He's going to get you. He's
By
going to get you.
restructuring the question, I mean, you're going to come forward, we'll say, your committee will come forward and say, okay, it's XYZ to do all we need to do on Hawks Ave.
Correct.
Boom, that's one article.
Correct.
Then the next article, or the previous article, might say, and to remediate the property behind the old police station, this is also X, because you're going to have a figure.
Yes. Yes.
Even
at that
though
point,
it's
we'll have
two
a figure.
separate articles, the people should be able to come up with a conclusion of, say, one's 5 million and one's $1 million. It's
Right.
6 million for
Right.
the total
As
project.
long as both those articles on
Are
October
separate.
2nd go through, then yes, we'll have the answers to those by next May. Yes.
Because that's kind of what people are also worried about. They don't want you to dump one.
Right.
Right.
And
Bring
then we
the
come
other
back
one.
and say, well, it's $3 million to get rid of the other building.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So yes, we will have that figure. Absolutely.
Because that is some concern. Because if it's a giant cleanup, I mean, some say, well, if it's a giant cleanup, we've got to do it anyway. But I think they want to know the full dollar value.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we will have that.
Now, by building the new building, I'm sure it's been taken into consideration the fact of being able to keep all the equipment inside. Is there savings in the fact that everything will be inside the buildings, whether it be the small stuff under lock and key or the big stuff? I mean, you need to factor in.
I mean, for example, Bob, right now, their plows, they have, let's call it 8 plows. They have to stay outside. Now, if you're able to keep a plow inside in Massachusetts, you probably get 20 years out of a commercial plow. But where it's being outside, you're probably lucky to get 12 or 14 years.
So it's gonna increase the life of the equipment.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it.
And it's also going to increase, I mean, I'm not saying anything becomes missing. I'm just saying if you have stuff under lock and key, it tends to stay under lock and key versus if it's loose and free,
Right.
sometimes it
walks.
becomes free.
Yeah.
It grows legs, so to speak. Is there anything we haven't touched on? You're not going to believe we're coming down. We've probably only got 3 or 4 minutes left. I mean, what would you say to the voters, Kenny, about this project? You're a taxpayer.
Yeah,
You're going to be paying part of it.
If I was a voter that wasn't involved with this stuff, I would want to see the current facility. I think if, and you can, anybody can call the highway surveyor, Bob Brown, or second in charge, Dave Hanlon, and just do a quick tour, and just walk through that building and see, like when they can't even fit all the trucks in there. One of our newest trucks, which is about 2 years old, won't fit in one of the buildings at all. And just walk into the bathroom and look at the facility that we're asking our town employees to work in. It's really bad. So I think we owe it to our employees to give them satisfactory working conditions.
Plus, would you say, Dan, I'm going to ask you because being an engineer, will this fit the town's needs for 50 or 60 years? Or?
We think it will. It fits right now, and it fits, if we use that second building for storage, it fits it with room to spare. And really, as Kenny pointed out, getting equipment inside is just key. It really makes a huge difference to the life of the equipment, and also to the response time. So if you have a plow truck that's out in the cold and you got to get it started up for a snowstorm, it's going to take you many minutes instead of having it inside when it starts up and it's ready to go. So I think it will suit the needs of the town. The good thing is the site is large and there's room for expansion if needs change and you do want to add additional space. But it's about twice the size of what's there now at Indian Head. So by comparison, it's really going to be a huge difference.
It must be even bigger than, parking lot wise, it must be much bigger than twice the size, because I can't imagine the Indian Head site's probably 2 acres.
If that, that's pretty small.
Yeah,
it's
and
not
we're
even 2
talking
acres.
about 6 or 7 acres here.
Right.
Not trying to jump ahead because we are winding down a little bit, but out of the 6 or 7 acres that we're talking about, is it all cleared or is it some of it treed?
It's not all clear. There's probably 3 acres, you'd say, by the cell tower over there that would have to be cleared.
Right.
Or a couple acres. Where the salt shed's going to go has to be clear. The rest of it is clear.
Yeah.
So, okay, just wrapping it up quickly, because believe it or not, as I told you, half an hour is not
Goes
going to go
fast.
very long, and we're in 2 minutes. We're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, the highway bond on Hawks Avenue. I have Kenny Mitchell, who's on the Board of Selectmen. I have Dan Tenney from the firm of Weston and Sampson, and they've given us kind of a comprehensive overview of what's going on Hawks Avenue. As Mr. Mitchell said to you, if you'd like to tour the property that we currently have, that Bob Brown who's a highway surveyor, and all of the employees are using, please go down, call them, make an appointment, tour it. Seeing is worth everything. The picture's 1,000 words. Well, that's kind of what it's like. If you go down and see what's going on at the current facility, and then if you would like a tour, I'm sure that they're going to be doing tours for the Hawks Ave property after October, before the next town meeting in May, so that'll give you a better idea. Keep looking at Hanson Express, and as always, if you want or you have any questions, you can contact me at bobhayes4433@gmail.com, or you can call me on my cell number at 617-538-0189. We value your opinion. Come forward, ask questions, be informed, and watch the next episode of Bringing It On. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.